Welcome to the Business and People podcast. I am your host, Walt Bayliss, and on today's episode, we're talking to Steve Rosenbaum, the original follow-up specialist, the man who believes in flawless follow-up. He's a LinkedIn influencer, CEO, and coach of what he calls the second act, the ability to take a central position in your life and design that second act. We talk through so many different things, including, does it take $10 million to retire? What's the best way to get started in an entrepreneur journey? And so many more steps. I really found the information in this interview encouraging, and there's a lot of great information that anyone can take and move forward with and really achieve some amazing goals in their life. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope you do too. Please enjoy our Business and People podcast, today's episode with Mr. Steve Rosenbaum. Steve, thanks very much for joining me, mate.
Walt, thank you for having me on your podcast.
It's a real pleasure, man. It's a real pleasure. I appreciate the time taken to jump on and have a chat with us. I mentioned in the introduction that you are known to be the flawless follow-up specialist. You're an author. I mean, you wear a lot of hats. What's a day in the life look like for you now that, with all of these things that you've got going on?
Well, that's a great question. Truthfully, I don't sleep. I get up real early my time, probably about 3 or 4 a.m. because I just can't sleep. And you're a perfect example because you're on the other side of the world from me. So if my eyes open up at 3 or 4 in the morning and I'm thinking, oh, I can go right now and I can speak to somebody in your time zone or, in India or Europe or whatnot. So I get more done every morning between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. than I ever did in the working world. And
wow.
Yeah, so I get a lot done at that time of the day. And I like to start with an hour just dedicated to myself and to my business before before the Skype starts going off and the emails start going off and the phone starts ringing and so forth. So I like to do that, and I like to always write an email out to my group and the people that follow me. I usually when I wake up, it's so funny, Walt. I know you're the same way. We've had this discussion. I wake up and I've got an email in my head, and it's one of the reasons I come running into the office. I'm like, well, I've got this email in my head, and I got to get it down, and I like to get it out early in the morning. Nice. So that's how we start the day every day.
Okay, fantastic. So your time is spent, then talking to clients and coaching. I know that you've got a lot of clients there as well. Tell me about that hour though, mate, before we get into that business. So you spend an hour working on your business, on yourself, and like I said, what's the kind of filler of that hour? What takes the priority there?
Well, it's probably more on my business than it is on myself. I have to work more on myself, to tell you the truth. I'm trying to lose weight, and I'm trying to stop all these nasty habits that I have. Now that we're getting older, so
right.
And I realize I'm not immortal. I used to think so, but I'm starting to realize that's not the case. But no, so that hour is really the time that I love systems. I love flawless follow-up. So I love to look at my system, which is really damn good as it is, but I like to perfect it, or I like to look at the numbers, or I like to. So one beautiful thing about marketing, the way that I market and the way that I build these systems is I can measure everything. So I can find exactly what works. And that's usually what I'm doing at that time.
Is there other tools that you use for that, mate? Because from my perspective, I like to probably use the crutch, and I do say it's a crutch, of saying that I'm not a numbers guy. Like the analytics and that kind of stuff really is something that I've struggled with my entire entrepreneur journey. Are there tools that you use to help you keep track of that stuff?
I'm going to bore you and tell you that Excel is the best thing in the world for that kind of stuff.
If that's the reality, that's the reality.
It is. Now it is the reality, but I am a numbers person, and it's what I did in my career. I mean, going back to when I was VP of sales for a company in the mid '90s. One of the ways I quadrupled their sales. This was a company that had hundreds of different products, but I discovered that this is really kind of based on the 80-20 rule, but I really was able to discover that if we got customers to buy 35 different products, or what we call SKUs at that point, but if we got customers to buy 35 products, then we would substantially build our business. And the reason why is because once they had that size assortment, they were always selling things and they were always needing to reorder and replenish. And so so the restocking orders would come. So I've always loved to wield numbers this way, and have found that the 80-20 rule or some variation of it really does have a lot of credence. And so, because of that, I always love to find what that is. In that case, it was 35 products. So that's with my sales team. I went out to my sales team. I said, you know what? I'm not going to whip you to try to place 200 products. I only want you placing 35, and you can pick which 35 they are. And that's one of the ways we quadrupled the sales was just doing that one thing.
I think any business owner who heard the words quadruple sales will be taking notes right now. Steve, tell me, how did you? So you've gone from an employee to an entrepreneur, solopreneur, team builder. How did that transition happen for you?
It happened one day. I actually tell the story. I got fired, Walt, is how it happened.
Yeah, right.
But, they did it to me before I could do it to them, is what happened. So like everybody else, I had that dream of one day I'm going to go out on my own, but I always was afraid of leaving that security of the check. Yeah. When I was young, I had a lot of success in the corporate world. I rose quickly through the ranks. I actually got hired away by a couple different companies, and I made a real nice salary for a guy my age, a six-figure plus salary, a real nice salary for somebody my age. And with that, I made all the classic mistakes. I bought a big house. I bought nice cars, and I had that security of the paycheck until I didn't have that security of the paycheck anymore, and it all went down like that.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And so at that time, the first time I was still afraid to go do it on my own, but I was getting closer. But I went out and I went without about a year without a real job. And this was really before I was online and on the internet and really understood how those things work. And I mean, it did. It really ruined us financially for a period of time.
Yeah.
And that's when we moved. That's when we moved from Illinois to Texas. I came down here to be closer to my wife's family and to start over. And we did. We started at ground zero, and I built it back up. But the same thing happened. The same thing happened once I got to that stage in my early 40s, and I was with a company that was tired of paying my salary, and they were having troubles, and they fired me again. And that's when I said, I'm never working for anybody else again.
Yeah, the risk is too high. People talk about entrepreneurialism being risky, and I always shrug my shoulders. Like I just know so many people where they walked into work on a Tuesday morning, and guess what? There's a note to go and see the boss, and there's marching orders, and they are done. You talk about risky, like that. To me, entrepreneurialism is the safer bet.
That's exactly right. And thus was the beginning of my second act, and that's where we're at right now.
And I want to talk about that for a second, because the concept of a second act is something that you're passionate about. Now, we were talking a few minutes ago about the hour in the morning, and you mentioned, we're getting older. And as I look across, I'm in my 40s now, and I look at the new breed of people coming into the workforce, these talented, young, driven guys and gals, and I know myself, if I wasn't able to create opportunities, create things as an entrepreneur, my chances of working in the workforce again, getting back in when I'm up against that competition, are pretty slim. So this concept of a second act, being in the second chapter of your life, is something that you talk a lot about. Tell me about your feelings around that and how that kind of manifests into what you do in business.
Well, it is so true, Walt. And the statistics are there to bear it out. And I'm the last year of the baby boomers. I am 55 as we're making this video. I was born in 1964. That is the last year of the baby boomers. And many of the people in my audience are my age and older. But I find this to be true of most marketers. And I know you and I have had this discussion. I know it's probably true of your audience. And not just because of my age, but you look at the statistics and look at what's happening. And corporate America is practicing ageism. At least they are here in the U.S., but I've heard it's true in your country and in Europe as well. All right, ageism is alive and well. People our age are having trouble finding work. They're getting let go from their jobs. They're not being offered opportunity for advancement. They're getting passed up if they even have a job. And I think you were telling me that horrible story about what was happening with your friend who was a firefighter in the UK. You know, this is happening everywhere. And the stats of people who can afford to retire, it doesn't exist. There's a financial guru. Her name is Suze Orman,
Yep.
who writes books, and she, in an interview, she said it's going to take you at least $5 million in the bank to retire. She says it's probably closer to 10. Now, you know how many people have $10 million in the bank in the U.S.? It's less than 0.5%. So for 99.5% of us, we're not going to be retiring. Yeah. So we better have a second act. We better figure out a way for us to make a stream of income. And the other thing is, I'm of the belief that you don't have to have 99 or $10 million in the bank to retire if you could produce cash flow. If you can have a stream of cash coming in, which fortunately, with the tools we have available to us today, with our ability to reach out to the entire world to spread our message, but even hone in on people specifically in our target audience like never before, we are so blessed to have that opportunity. And I'm just trying to help people take advantage of that, because I think that's the answer.
So I think can I just focus in on that for a second? Because, Suze Orman is a well-known author, in terms of writing from a financial perspective. And the commentary to say to somebody, it's probably closer to 10 million in the bank, at least 5 million in the bank, that is generating then a cash flow stream. That's why she's picked that number, because she's basically looked at it and said, okay, that's going to give you, X amount of thousands of dollars a week to be able to survive. However, as a business owner, that number of 5 million or 10 million being in the bank necessary to create a cash flow of X amount of thousands of dollars a month can be quickly achieved by being a self-creator, by finding an opportunity, by targeting a customer group in the right way, and by engaging technology, even though it's a little bit scary, and creating that cash flow that can completely replace the need to have a $5 or $10 million bank account. Do you believe that anyone that has access to the internet today could achieve that kind of cash flow in the second act of their lives?
Well, sure. I mean, I have coached so many people to do so, and I know you have as well, people from all walks of life, and it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, I just got a testimonial from somebody the other day that thanked me because the way I showed him how to work LinkedIn, he's about to get his first paying client ever. Wow. And this was somebody that didn't have the confidence, didn't feel like he had the tools, but I was able to show him the way. And it's a beautiful thing. And there's so many people doing it. And the great thing about what we're talking about is I like to focus on what I call your pet. It's your passion, your experience, and your talent. Because the one thing that we do have when we get to this stage of our lives is we have experience. You can't get this gray hair without experience. That's where it comes from. Yeah. Hopefully we've got passion. If we have a pulse, we should have some passion. And we all have talent, though some of us just refuse to give ourselves credit for it. So the reality is we do have, if you allow yourself to tap into your pet, to your passion, to your experience, to your talent, then what you're going to find is you excel at something and you can go help people with that. And just look at YouTube and look at the endless number of topics on YouTube. I know people that are making $1 million a year. I just said the word Excel a second ago, and I talked about Excel spreadsheets. I know people making $1 million a year by teaching people how to use Excel spreadsheets.
There it is, as easy as that.
It is. I know moms that make videos showing other moms how to help their kids learn to tie their shoes or even potty train, and they're able to create info products about that and monetize that. So it really can be whatever your passion, your experience, and your talent is.
Wow, is that something that you have so I guess I'm endorsing some of your coaching here. Is that something that you have a system for? Somebody comes to you and says, Steve, I'm in the second act. I'm either scared of losing my job. Maybe I have lost it already. Either way, I'm concerned. This is my position. Do you have a strategy for taking that person with no idea what that passion, talent, and what was the E? Sorry,
a T. It's passion, experience, and talent.
So they've got that PET acronym. They have no idea what that may turn out to be. Do you have a system for taking someone from A to B to be able to teach them how to create something that they have and can wrap around themselves?
I do, and thanks for asking. And we haven't. This is something you and I have never spoken about, but I have a course, and I call it I call it the legacy way. I was having trouble finding the last word there. It's called the legacy way, and I built it based on that word legacy because I'm teaching people how to leave a legacy. That back in my corporate career, when the first time I got fired, I hired a coach to help me to start. This is when I probably first started exploring the internet. We're talking right around the year 2000. And he was a guy that was already on the internet and was already selling ebooks. He was an author of 2 Dummies books. He wrote the book Act for Dummies, based on the Act CRM program. And he wrote a book called Time Management for Dummies. And his name was Jeffrey Mayer. And I paid Jeffrey $5,000 to start coaching me. And Jeffrey made a little bit of money with those Dummies books. He said they gave him about $1 a book, and he'd sold about 100,000 books. So he made about $100,000 off the books. But he also retained the right to those. And Jeffrey, back in the year 2000, was selling ebooks online. And basically, each ebook was almost a chapter out of a book. And Wow. He sold them for like $16. Okay.
And he owned the rights to all of that $16.
All of it.
Yeah.
So he made a fortune off of that, right? So selling the chapters for $16. So Jeffrey unfortunately died suddenly. He was only 55 years old, same age as I am right now. And he was walking with his wife downtown Chicago, walking home after dinner, and he collapsed on the sidewalk and died of a heart attack.
Wow.
Well, what I don't think he realized, but he had in fact created a legacy because the books kept selling even after he was gone. And they provided an education for his daughter, and they provided financial means for his wife. And in fact, a few years later, his wife actually sold the rights to the book to somebody else. So she got a lump of cash coming in because somebody took it over and updated them. And to this day, you could still buy his stuff. So he created a legacy just by spreading his passion, his experience, and his talent. So I have created a course called The Legacy Way, all about that.
That's fantastic. And so I've got in the show notes, people can catch up with you at steverosenbaum.com. But I think what's interesting for me, Steve, is that, again, I just want to grab Suze Orman's name because she's such a standout in terms of this message. From a financial perspective, we always look at the books and we see this word asset. And everybody talks about assets. And assets, if we go back to the Robert Kiyosaki books, assets are something that creates a positive cash flow. And typically, if you started throwing that word around a room of people our age and ask them to list off a bunch of assets, they're going to come back to you with $1 million stuff, right? It's going to be, it's going to be a 2-bedroom apartment over here. It's going to be a little coffee business down there. It's going to be this 3-bedroom house in the suburb somewhere. Like, it's going to be what we would determine as a cash flow positive real estate. It's going to be something that typically is going to cost you $50,000 plus to have. And yet, when we have this amazing ability that we're talking on right now, technology, you can create an asset that's digital with absolutely zero capital outlay that can continue to pay you forever. And the unbelievable ability for us to create assets such as ebooks, websites, videos, webinar recordings, interviews like this, podcast episodes. These things live on a long time after the final enter key's been pushed, the final recording button's been paused. That ability to create assets that generate cash flow has never been better. And I love that you have a system to be able to help people do that.
And I'm so glad you brought up Robert Kiyosaki because he's perfect, because he defines that asset as something that actually generates cash. Some people think their car is an asset, and it's not. It's a liability. They owe money on their car. Besides that, it is not appreciating in value, and it's not getting you any cash, I guess, unless you're an Uber driver. But so I'm so glad you said that. But I'll take it one step further, which is not only does it not cost anything, it's the only business that I know of that can actually deliver you money before you actually make the product. You and I right now, we could sell rights to this video, or we could sell rights to a course or even a book, and based on the sales, decide if we're ever going to bring it to market or not.
Yeah, definitely. Like, just put it out there and ask if people are interested, and see if you've got the interest before you have to outlay any time or money at all. I think it's fascinating, and I love that that focus on the second act, because you're right. A lot of the people in that space, and of which I am one, look at where we are on the planet, thinking about the next half, the second half, and we're thinking, what can we do and where can we go? Steve, what would you say so far is your biggest achievement? What's the one that you can hang your hat on proudly?
Well, you business-wise, I'm very pleased that I've really been able to create processes that are duplicatable and replicatable for helping both businesses and individuals. So, the fact that I have taken my knowledge and created something that not only works for me, but has worked so well for so many others. From a business standpoint, that's what I'm most pleased with. But it is seeing it in action, and it is seeing the responses that I get from people when I hear the stories. I've got a gentleman in New Zealand, whose name is Jamie Houston, who, when he came into my program, he was in his early 40s and he was working retail. He said, "Steve, I've been trying to get out of this for 20 years. I'm so tired of working retail. I'm so tired of standing up for 40 hours a week, and I don't get paid any money, and I'm so tired of this." And in a very short period of time, I was able to help him create a very, very successful business for himself. In fact, he gave me that little drawing there, right there. That's me as a sensei on the floor, and that's him as the young grasshopper, and he's just saying, thank you for what you say. It says, this was great. That's Jamie.
Nice.
Right?
That's awesome. That's a really cool one. Very nice.
Yeah, that's a really cool one.
So, in terms of achievements and something that you're proud of, like being able to see the success of the things that you've put in place be, I guess, reenacted by people who are following those steps, and also then seeing those success stories and changing lives. That's fantastic, mate. What would you say would you be? I think as an entrepreneur, we don't celebrate our wins enough. Let me say that. We always focus on our losses and beat ourselves up about it. But what would you say in this second act that you've been able to create something amazing? What's been your biggest mistake so far, and what did you learn from it along the way?
Today?
Okay.
I make mistakes every day, every single day. And some of them I repeat. But, one saying that I adopted a while ago, and I think I first heard Mario Brown say it first, but then I realized, I think I came to find that he wasn't the first one to say it, but that's okay, because it really made an impression on me. But he said, imperfect action beats perfect inaction every time.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself that every day, because I am a perfectionist. And, and so the mistakes that I continue to make all the time is that I probably don't release things fast enough. And people tell me all the time, "Steve, how do you do it? How do you get so much stuff? You got so much content out there. You should only know the stuff that never makes it," because I spend too much time trying to perfect it. And so I make that mistake. I continue to make that mistake. And I sign a lot of my emails to, when I'm sending things out to my following, and I sign it sometimes, take imperfect action. And many times I'm doing that to remind myself as well as reminding them.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think, we talked about that, the ability to self-create. Creating something can create the legacy, as we talked about. I saw a saying which I loved, which was create something today, even if it sucks. And that was the saying, create something today, even if it sucks. And I told a story just a little while ago of being able to come up with an idea, move it through a process into a market. And even if all you've done is gone from a scribble on a piece of paper to a product that hasn't even made a sale yet, you've created something of value that has a tangible sale value to someone. You can sell that. And you can literally create money out of thin air if you're following those steps forward. What do you think, Steve? What do you think that we in the entrepreneurial space, or people coming into that second act of their lives, what do you wish that we spoke about more that we don't bring out into the open enough?
That is a wonderful question. That is a wonderful question. And I think I'm going to ask you if we can come back to that, because that one deserves some thought. And nothing comes to mind right at the moment.
Let's come back to it. Let's come back to it. For me, I think, my personal one on that is, I think we all need to talk more about the real connections in the human space. Today on an entrepreneurial journey, we focus in so hard, and just because we're talking to 10 different people on Facebook and 16 people on Skype doesn't mean we're connecting. And I think, certainly from my personal experience, and I hope I'm giving you a little bit of time to think from your own as well. My personal experience is whenever somebody comes onto Facebook and has that honest post, talks about a hard time that they've just come through, what I see is so many entrepreneurs and so many people jump onto that thread and say, thank you. Oh my God, I'm having such a hard time. This whole entrepreneurial journey is a roller coaster, and we all enjoy the wins and the celebrations, and there's some dark times and hard times. And when we see that honest post on Facebook, we see so many people say, oh my God, I've been low, I've been hard, it's been tough, it's been whatever. I wish that we spoke more about the need to get connected in a human environment, get out from behind the screen and go and take a walk on the beach. Go and, if you haven't spoken to your social group in a long time, and I'm not talking about a coaching group, I'm not talking about being in the business space, I'm talking about something else. Go and speak to a friend, go and call that person that you meant to, and reach out, because we all tend to condense up. We all go into a ball. We all work harder. We think that seventh cup of coffee and the working till 3 a.m. is going to fix the problem. And in actual fact, what we need to do is shut down, get out, and actually be human. And that gives the juice to come back and solve the problem. That's my thoughts anyway.
Well, I love it. And I think you're right on. It definitely resonates with me. We have some personal things going on too with family members that aren't well. We moved to where we are in Texas because my in-laws, my wife's folks, literally live 3 doors that way. Yeah. All right, so we moved here to be able to be close to them, and her father's really going through some tough times right now, and frankly might be getting near the end, and that's why we're here. Yeah. And so between work and between this stuff, I think you are 100% right. And just a couple of weeks ago, for the first time in a long time, I really shut down for about 10 days. We took a trip. We drove up to see my folks up in Chicago for my mom's 80th birthday. And, Walt, it was the first time that I did not boot up my computer. I did not check what was going on in Facebook. Yep. And my wife and I really spent time together. We drove, so we had a lot of time together. And I have to tell you, I came back so recharged and so refreshed. So I think what you said really, really resonates with me.
Yeah. I posted on something just a couple of weeks ago. I posted just a little image, and it said on there, dreams. It's nice to see you. It's been a while since I've checked in. And for me, I wrote that because some of the times when you're focusing so hard on how am I going to get through this next little bump in the road, you get so buried in. And for me, that post was, I'd taken an hour that day, and I'd literally just sat with a blank piece of paper and with no intention of writing anything, and just looked out and thought about, what am I looking forward to? What are the dreams? I'm not talking about a goal. I'm not talking about let's do this by this time. I'm talking about a dream. What's the big one? Wow, this would be just the most amazing life of all. And spent just a little bit of time living in that wow, amazing look forward. And to energize like that, to come back and just feel like, right, I know my reason, I've got a real, fire. And it was, for me, that was a great little recharge session. I said to somebody just not more than an hour ago, I said, if you're facing troubles, if you're an entrepreneur, wherever life finds you, right? You've got, maybe you're going through that second act reshuffle right now, or you've got things that are happening around you. Wherever life finds you, whatever's happening is still going to be happening in 2 hours from now. Take the time to get prepared. Just shut down, shut off, step back, give yourself a minimum of 60 minutes to 2 hours and just be separated from it, because I promise when you come back to it, it's going to seem a lot easier to deal with.
Good for you.
That's
Good
my
for
thoughts
you.
anyway.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, Steve, let's. Sorry, we got off track there, but I want to come back a little bit, because your message and your group, the people that are following along with you, as you said, predominantly are in that second act. They're kind of coming into the big hurrah, and we want to make sure that the show ends with a bang. What would you give as advice on the other end of the life scale? You've got an opportunity to stand on stage with a room full of graduating students, right? This is an auditorium filled with people who have just done their studies. They've got their hats on, and they're looking forward to coming out into that real world environment. What's your sage advice for the kids in that room?
Well, my sage advice would be not to make that mistake that I did, which was I gave everything to that corporate life when I was their age. And it took away from my family, and it took away, it gave us some things materialistically, and then it got taken away real quickly. And it also nearly destroyed my marriage, and I wasn't there for the first few years of my kids growing up because of it. And yep. So it seems like that corporate career is so important, and it is. But I would say, learn to carve out that piece for yourself early. The stuff we're talking about now is an important step. I wish I knew it 20 years ago. I wish I knew it 30 years ago. Believe me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if only we did, like, things would be different. Like we would be on a different path. So what about winding the clock forward then in that case, Steve? So you just mentioned, as we're recording this, you're 55. Let's wind forward. Let's go 20 years, right? Suddenly we've got that time machine. We've met Doc Brown. We've got the flux capacitor working in the background. Everybody our era knows that movie, so I'm making the right references. Everybody else is going, what? Right. So let's have a look at that 20 years from now. We have an opportunity to catch up with your 75-year-old self, and the ability for that 75-year-old self to give you advice right now for these next 20 years. What advice do you think your 75-year-old self would give you now?
Oh boy. It's the same redundant message. This is, I'm feeling like a boring interviewee right now, but I do like it so much. I am learning to take that time for myself right now, and I know it's the right thing to do. For me, I will tell you, take better care of myself. I'm losing weight right now. I've lost 35 pounds. I have another.
Congrats.
I've got another 50 to go.
Well done.
Thank you. So for me personally, it's taking better care of myself. And for me, that means my weight, and I should probably give up cigars. So those are the two things for me: eat better, exercise more, take care of myself, and cigars. So look, that's probably the biggest thing, because I joked earlier that I'm realizing that I'm not immortal, and it is true. And it is, I used to think I was athletic when I was young, and I used to think, I could do that. I could run 100 yards. I can't run 10 yards. It's amazing. Things are flopping all over the place, and then I'll fall flat on my face. It probably has a lot to do with my center of gravity is a lot different than it was.
Right. It's funny how that moves.
But so for me, it's taking better care of myself. And by the way, that's sleep too. I got to get my sleep on a normal pattern. So those are the things that certainly I know I need to work on, and I know I do. So those are the things that 20 years from now I will tell you that I took better care of myself.
What about on a business level? So that wise 75-year-old Steve Rosenbaum has got an amazing life and achievement in these next 20 years. What would the business-related advice be to you as the young 55 man that you are now?
Be consistent. Keep doing it.
Yep.
I took my eye off of certain things in the past few years, and felt the ramifications of it. I know what I'm doing. I've got a good business plan, and it works. So just be steady, just be consistent, and probably do less. Probably do less. I probably spread myself too thin and try to do too much.
That's great advice. It sounds like your 75-year-old self has got his head screwed on. So I would listen to that, man. He sounds like he's got some pretty wise words there, man. Play this back when I send it to you. All right, Steve, tell me something. We've got a couple of questions just to wrap up. And again, I really value your time. Thank you so much for sharing it with me. Tell me something that people would find surprising about you.
What would people find surprising about me? Walt, I'm so boring.
That may be the answer.
Maybe that is the answer, right?
Well, there you go. I think, you know what, you come across so beautifully to the group. I've watched some of your smart and skinny walks as you're heading out the door. You come across so beautifully to the group. I think that answer is a very humble one, because I've seen the way that you engage, and there's nothing that I find boring in any way. Steve, I've got a 60-second challenge for you.
Oh boy.
You've got a friend that you haven't seen in a long time. You happen to bump into each other and catch up, and let's grab a coffee. This friend of yours tells you that they've been following what you've done over the last few years and really love that message, and they've just taken the leap that you endorse so highly, and they've gone out on their own. They really admire everything that you've talked about. You've got 60 seconds to give them some amazing advice for someone who's just started out on their own and is looking to you for that path to follow. What would you tell that friend in 60 seconds?
I would tell them, stop trying so hard to sell something and look for buyers. That is what my message about flawless follow-up is all about. Selling is not about convincing people. This old saying of he could sell ice to the Eskimos is ridiculous, and it doesn't work. All right. So selling is not about you know, having a silver tongue and being a terrific wordsmith, and it's not about trying to convince people to buy. You're going to be much more successful spending your time filtering out for those buyers that are raising their hand and saying they are ready, willing, and able to buy right now. I tell people that all the time. Lead generation is dead. This idea of lead generation, it's all about lead qualification. All right? Because you can go out and generate leads. I know people on LinkedIn, I know people that are buying these courses and they think it's all about connections, and they build up 1,000 connections. Well, do the math. How long is it going to take you to reach out to those 1,000 people and have a dialogue with those 1,000 people to find out if they really are, or to convince them or to sell them? It'll take you a minimum of 1.5 years, minimum, okay? So you can't do that. But I said earlier, I'm a believer of the 80-20 rule. So what does that mean? Does that mean that 200 of them may be qualified? Guess what? It might be less. It might be 100. It might be 50. But you would do fantastically well if you found 50 buyers today, wouldn't you? So the real thing you need to be doing is finding those 50 buyers out of the 1,000 connections, and stop worrying about this big number of 1,000 of generating, and start worrying about qualifying.
Fantastic advice. Fantastic advice. Stop trying to sell people and start looking for buyers. Who's the ideal buyer for your product? Where do they hang out? What do they look at? What's the problem that they have? And start crafting the message towards that pinpoint rather than spreading it as a blanket. I love it. Steve, what are some of the books, the media, the people, what are some of the things that have been essential resources for you in your journey forward?
Well, I like the classic marketers. I like Dan Kennedy. I love Dan Kennedy. The man sold over $1 billion. And, when you think about Dan Kennedy and the people of his era that did this with paper and ink versus, we do things digitally. We talk about there's no cost to it. Well, that's not the case in his time, right? In his time, for them to split test a simple message, it cost, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it took weeks or even months to get an answer. Something that we could do for $50 and have an answer within a couple hours, So those were real talented people. And so there's so much wisdom that comes out of the Dan Kennedys of the world and so forth. Ken McCarthy, I love following him. I love Ben Settle, who's a copywriter. I read a lot of his books. I've spent a lot of money with him, but I love it. I love the way he writes, and frankly, I've patterned some of my writing style after learning from him and honing my writing craft. Those are some of the people that I look up to.
Awesome, man. They're good tools and some great recommendations there. So I'll make sure I put those in the show notes as well for everyone. And so I guess just to wrap up, Steve, I'm so grateful for the chance to come on and have a chat with you about this second act and about the ability to self-create. What's next for you? What's the horizon? What's the goal that you're working towards? Where are you headed personally?
Well, I've always stated, as long as I've been in this game, I've stated I have two main passions. My first passion is to help businesses succeed. I am very, very passionate about small businesses. I believe that they are the lifeblood of our way of life, and so that's my number one passion. My number two passion is to help people help those businesses, and that's a way that I'm creating a lot of opportunity for people in their second act. If they don't know what to do in their second act, well, I can help them, and the way I'm going to help them is teach them how they can go out and help the businesses in their own backyard. Those businesses need so much help. So there's that, but also. I came up through sales, and so I want to be careful. I don't want to say selling because I just said it's not about selling, but it is about having processes in place, and that's those processes for filtering for those buyers and so forth. So my newest program that I'm very excited about is called the RWA machine. RWA stands for Ready, Willing, and Able, because that's what I'm talking about. Looking for those people that raise their hand, say, I'm ready, willing, and I'm able to hire you right now. It applies to any line of work, not just to local marketing, but no matter what you are in business for. If you spend your time and if you lay out a process and a machine for not only attracting, but being able to spot those people that are ready, willing, and able, you're going to have a lot more success. So that's my newest training program that I'm very excited about.
Oh, fantastic, mate. I'm looking forward to seeing it come through. I think it's going to make a great difference for everybody that's looking for that next move for themselves and to be able to power through their own second act. Steve Rosenbaum, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really appreciate the wisdom that you shared. I hope you listened to the sage advice of your 75-year-old self. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got coming through, mate. Again, thank you so much for the time. And thanks for joining me.
Well, Walt, I thank you. And is it okay if I leave a little gift for the people that watch this? Because we talked a little bit about that RWA machine, but I'm going to make a little video, and I'll do this when we're done here today. But I'll explain a little more, and because it's so powerful, and it works for anybody, no matter what type of business they're in.
I'd love it.
And that's going to be the asset that creates that income and to get your second act going. So
fantastic.
Why don't I set up a page at, we'll call it steverosenbaum.com/Walt.
Fantastic. steverosenbaum.com/Walt. That's going to be a gift from the man himself, talking about that RWA system, being able to find customers using the Ready, Willing, and Able system. And again, Steve, thank you so much for joining me. And I really appreciate your time, man.
Walt, I thank you. And I love your podcast. I've watched several of them, and it's an honor for me to be here. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure, man. A pleasure.